welcome everyone. Thanks so much for PDFA Association for hosting this event. And yeah, so let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm Andrey. I'm a solutions engineer at PDFTron. And today I'm going to talk to you about how we can automate document anonymization and pseudonymization. Now, the last word is quite tricky. I had a couple tries to say it correctly as well. Okay, so let's jump in. So I want us to kind of get all on the same page. What is redaction? So redaction is the process of censoring, deleting, or obscuring confidential text and images inside of the document. So why do we need redaction? Well, here's some of the redaction use cases. I think the most popular use case is redaction of personally identifiable information. And personally identifiable information is any information that can uniquely identify a person. This redaction is also used for removal of proprietary data from document sharing during financial transactions or legal contract review. In financial transaction words, specifically around merger and acquisition, you really don't want to give someone prior to kind of merging the two companies together any kind of apprehended knowledge that can kind of drive the necessary conditions during the negotiation process up or down. And then redaction of protected health information. So when kind of releasing the medical health records or clinical trial data, we only want to ensure that only the must-know information kind of gets out, instead of releasing any patient info that's not specifically related to the clinical trial that's ongoing. And then when hiring that perfect candidate, to remove any bias from the applications or resumes. And then when creating data sets for ML training, we want to ensure that, again, there's no personally identifiable data inside of it. And a lot of kind of businesses do not actually understand GDPR, California Privacy Act, or LGPD, coming the new one from Brazil. And to stay compliant with it, there's few kind of rules and guidelines that they must follow. And a lot of kind of North American businesses don't realize that even though they are kind of out of European jurisdiction, because they're handling European data, Europeans use their data, they need to stay compliant with the GDPR. And to do that, to kind of store the data long term, they should go ahead and redact any personally identifiable information inside of the documents that they're planning to retain for longer periods of time. So here, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at different approaches to the redaction and how it's done, how it's been done historically, and what are kind of the better ways to do it today. Okay, so historically, we're all kind of familiar with printing out the document and physically marking it up with a Sharpie or a black highlighter, and then scanning the document back in. Even before that, the redaction was actually quite a manual process by manually cutting out that piece of information that needed to be removed from the document. Now, there are certain drawbacks to this approach. First, it creates multiple versions of the document when we're kind of scanning it back in. User has to either download or print the document, which in case of the printing of the document is not very environmentally friendly. The quality of the scanned images is actually affected as well, depending on the printer kind of settings. And then when placing the images back in, it's crooked, misaligned, and doesn't look too good. And sometimes the redacted content can still be seen by changing the contrast value and playing around with the image, especially if it was done with a black highlighter or a Sharpie. Okay, so then, to kind of improve that process, the next step is image-based redaction. So image-based redaction involves converting PDF to an image, rasterizing the PDF, and then blanking out those specific pixels of any sensitive information that needs to be removed. Now, there's drawbacks to this approach as well. Even though it's way more secure than kind of the previous approach, the document is no longer searchable. So when we turn it into kind of go from PDF to an image, we'll lose that searchability. And a lot of the times the size might actually increase since a PDF kind of contains instructions how to rasterize the content and present it from the vector-based information. When kind of just keeping it as an image, it just contains the high-res imagery. And as such, especially if there is a lot of complex content, it might blow up the size of the PDF or the kind of resulting image from the conversion. And even though the size of the image is increasing, the quality is actually lost at the larger zoom. So especially when we're dealing with kind of very complex, with a lot of kind of elements inside of it, if we need to kind of zoom in and go in far, that might actually be lost when converting into an image. However, it is a bit more secure. And this one is probably the best approach to redaction, is kind of following the PDF specification set out. We can use the redaction annotations to kind of signify or place areas that need to be marked up for the redaction. Now we can get the bounding box of the redaction annotation and using the quads information or the coordinates, find out any elements that either are underneath or intersect together with that bounding box. And then we can ensure that we remove text, images, path, and other elements that are underneath it to make sure that even if some information is not visible, we still go ahead and remove it. And this way we can maintain the original format, we can stay in PDF, and we can maintain searchability and original metadata of the document. And this, perfect. Okay, so what are some common redaction workflows? So perhaps the most popular workflow that we can think of is that the user kind of manually brings up the document and they have to scan it with their eyes to see and find any of the content that needs to be removed. Now, we're all humans and we make errors. The user might actually miss the key content to be redacted. And the process is very time consuming. So if we're dealing with kind of a contract that's 50 pages long, and we have to deal with 10 of them, it really adds up. And then, with each document, the quality is lost. So the user is getting tired, and it just becomes a mess. Now, to kind of improve that process and help the user up, the user can start performing the search for specific keywords or pattern matching to find the content to be redacted. Now, depending on the search engine used to kind of search through the PDF or the text algorithm that kind of powers that search capability, it might not actually yield the correct result. And what I mean by that, we know that inside of a PDF, the way kind of words appear on the screen, the way this kind of presentation slide would appear is not always the order it's actually stored in. So if the kind of text extraction algorithm is using the logic-based order extraction, the results we might get from that text, it might be kind of gibberish or out of order. And then kind of searching for it might not actually kind of give us the correct terms and values. And sometimes some of the words that we search for might be just kind of skipped over because they've been broken out into several characters. And as well as, especially in kind of a multi-language, if the person is speaking multiple languages, the keyword can actually change from user to user. So for example, the way I would search for something on a document might actually be different from my colleagues. So then we might not actually find the exact results of the content that needs to be redacted. And Google search does a great job of it. So they can aggregate the searches were done and then the content that's been selected. However, on a PDF, we don't have kind of Google search-based engine, so we can't really aggregate the search results to provide the right data. And then to kind of demonstrate what I'm speaking about for the search results, you can actually take a look at the PDFGS search, and there's one specific document that PDFGS has a hard time kind of exploring. So this slides will be available after presentation, so you can kind of visit this link at your leisure. Okay, so if there's no formal workflow is available, if the user is kind of left out there, the users will get creative and they will try to figure out a new approach. So, there's drawbacks, like you can't really control what the user is going to do. And it could, end up that the user downloads the local copy of the document to their computer, and somebody might actually get a hold of their workstation. For example, we're all working from home at the moment. And same thing, you can't really enforce a retention policy on the user downloads folder or any of the folders that they're saving the file. So potentially the file might just be sitting there and it's no longer compliant with the GDPR. They might go out and try to use any third-party tools, whether they're web-based or they're desktop-based. But if you right now kind of go and search for redacted PDF online, there's going to be tons of different tools available. However, not all of us kind of take the time to read the terms and conditions and realize how our data is going to be used, whether or not it's going to be sold for any other purposes. So when we're uploading the sensitive data to servers across multiple countries, it can actually lead to high risk of data loss or leaks. And for example, Canadian government, any Canadian citizen's data actually needs to be staying within Canada's jurisdiction. So anytime a Canadian government employee kind of goes in, downloads the document, and uses any online server that maybe is hosted in US, they're potentially breaching the privacy on the Canadian citizen and therefore no longer compliant. And again, if there's no formal workflow, if there's no kind of a process in place, it just leads to unnecessary time lost. Downloading the document, uploading the document to different tools, kind of emailing around really kind of creates a mess and time lost. It is also a nightmare to get someone to kind of coordinate and get everybody on the same page. It creates a barrier to enhancement if every person in an organization or the group has their own unique process at the way they do things or track things kind of during this process. Okay, so what are some redaction failures? And we don't have to go far. For example, they happen quite often. So for example, whereas with the former Trump campaign, Chair Paul Manafort failed to properly redact pleadings they filed in the federal court of 2019. The copy-paste actually revealed incriminating, simply by copy-pasting, it revealed incriminating information underneath because the content was only obscured with a black highlight annotation, but the text was still underneath. So they just placed the black highlight, they didn't burn it in, just left it there, and they didn't convert it to an image. And then another one, most recent one, the PDF document released by the US government as part of Jeffrey Epstein investigation were also reported to be improperly redacted, enabling public access to sensitive content underneath. Now, it makes kind of great deal for news outlets because they can get juicy facts and information directly from the source. However, it's not good for privacy of the users. So, we talked about how what is redaction, what are different kind of redaction flows, and then redaction failures. But now let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about how we can improve the redaction flow. Okay, so we want to ensure that we use true redaction that are compliant with the PDF specification. We want to ensure that when performing redaction, we remove all the underlying elements. And we need to not just kind of remove anything that we see, but also anything we do not see. So for example, there could be some personally identifiable information inside of metadata, or actually files attached inside of a PDF. You can have a PDF attached with another PDF attached with another PDF. So it's kind of like a PDF inception. So the trick to that, you can just remove any attachments that the document has to ensure that there's not going to be any sensitive information inside of the attachments on a PDF. Or you can just kind of recursively go through each one and just ensure that you remove it. Now, sometimes there could be sensitive information outside of the visible region. So to kind of combat that, we can adjust the crop box of a PDF page to ensure there's no content that is not visible to the user. So just kind of blow it up, see if there's any elements, or you can actually perform the search on the document through and kind of check if anything falls outside of that specified crop box. And if it does, just remove it. Okay, and we really want to kind of help users to spend more time on where their time is valuable, and kind of any automation tasks we can kind of outsource to an automated process to increase accuracy and the speed of the review. So I'm going to talk about some of those. And when it comes to kind of verifying whether or not redaction took place, here's a best way to kind of test it out. First, I would try to kind of select any of the text in the redacted areas to make sure there was nothing kind of missed and I cannot copy paste anything, any underlying content. I can try to remove the redaction annotations. So what I would do is grab the document from the viewer where the annotations are coming from, and then open it up in a different viewer and maybe give myself elevated permissions like an administrator to play around with annotations and then try to remove them. And then using a low-level PDF inspection tools to confirm that the redacted elements have been completely removed. Okay, and really want to stress this one. We want to avoid user download. We need to provide users with a workflow that doesn't push them to download the document and create multiple conflicting versions. So let's say we have multiple people working on a 50-page contract, 1,000-page contract. We really want to make sure that we're out kind of working from the same single source of truth. We are not creating multiple versions that are kind of getting emailed around. And as we know that email is not very secure, so we want to kind of keep the user within our application, or within our application, and ensure that nothing gets leaked out and they can move the document through stages. So for example, in case of multiple people working on the same document, we can actually kind of enable them to go through multiple stages. So the first stage might be, the redaction annotations are actually placed ahead of the time. They're kind of created programmatically by searching for specific key terms, patterns, any word bank that we have, and then kind of place them. And the first kind of user comes in and says, okay, cool, I'm going to review it. Okay, this redaction annotation is good. Oh, it missed this content right here. And it can move to the next stage to their supervisor and kind of speed that process up. And then this way, you also have full control over document lifecycle and transition over your network. You know exactly what service is going to hit in what countries. And this way you can ensure that you stay compliant with any jurisdiction restrictions your users might have. So here's some of the kind of advantages of client-side redaction. Client-side meaning we do everything kind of on the front end. So if we're talking about a web application, kind of the redaction would actually take place inside of a user's browser. So we can really minimize the security risk of document kind of traveling around. And then we have less server infrastructure to kind of create or upkeep. So it kind of results to be a little bit more cost efficient. So what I mean by that is that with the client-side approach, what we can do is we can have a file storage that we pull the document out of and then open it up in the user's web application in front of them. The user can mark up any of the areas that need to be redacted. And after they're satisfied, they can actually apply and burn in all the reductions directly inside of their web app. And this way, you can save off a new copy of the document, or you can use that document right away in the next step or flow. So for example, you can release it for public access or email out to the legal counsel of the opposing party. It is also easier to deploy and scale. So instead of kind of having to have a file storage, a web application, a server that hosts the front-end web application, the server that will be performing the redactions and the text extraction, you can just kind of move everything to the front end. And this way, the more as your application grows and more people are signing up for your application and using it, you don't have to worry about the infrastructure that you're maintaining and kind of scaling the servers. Okay, so anonymization versus pseudonymization, that's a hard one. So at the start of the slide, I have those two terms up, but so far we've been kind of talking about redaction. So let me kind of go through it and ensure that we understand the differences between the two. And then towards the end of it, we're going to have a live call. Okay, so anonymization. So anonymization ensures that the person or data cannot be identified. Both California Privacy Act and GDPR, they actually allow sale of anonymized data. So any of the data that you collect on the users, as long as you properly redact it and remove any personally identifiable information, you can sell that data anywhere. Okay, so here's how like an anonymized document could look like. So for example, here we have certain redacted areas. However, at a first glance, the document's kind of hard to read. And especially if the document is even more redacted, then it becomes a nightmare. We're losing kind of key points for us to connect the dots on what's happening inside of the document. So we could lose a lot of contextual information necessary. Now, a lot of redactors out there, they can actually add the labels on top of excised areas to identify what type of information was removed. And this process is called pseudonymization, the identification process. Now, for example, if we have a date of birth that we're dealing with, we can actually replace it with a range. So instead of kind of giving the exact, we can say 25 to 40 years of age. Addresses can be replaced with a more generic geographical location, and the amounts can be replaced with an approximate range. So let's take a look at how a pseudonymized document could look like. Okay, so here the document didn't lose any context, but any identifying data have been removed. So for example, we know that we're talking about a vendor and a bank, and the whole thing is happening in Vancouver, BC, Canada, so we know what jurisdiction it falls under. We also know that the amount is talking about USD documents, and we know the currency. So how we can improve this process and kind of make it better? Well, using the tag structure of a PDF, we can know what type of content that we're dealing with, and using ML training that kind of receives a lot of the redacted data to be replaced with something else, we can actually train it up to ensure that it provides this meaningful context, but without providing any identifying information. So, for example, a few approaches are here, how to kind of improve that process and how I think this process will be improved in the future. Now, the really cool one, Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3 from OpenAI, can actually recognize human-like text from the search term provided to perform accurate redaction. So if you remember a couple of slides ago, I was kind of talking about that the way you and I would search for exact same piece of information might actually be different. So in their online demo for GPT-3, they actually had a Wikipedia article about bread, and the user was Googling or searching on the document to say, okay, what makes the bread squishy? And even though there was not a single mention of squishy, it took the user down to the right place where it was talking about what makes the dough fluffy and kind of what ingredients kind of go in. So yeast to kind of make it rise up and make it fluffy. So this way it was pretty cool to see. And one of the applications I thought for GPT-3 is to take it and build kind of to help users, doesn't matter the way they search, but try to see if we can approximate any of the data relevant to their search term to perform accurate redaction. Okay, now time for a live poll. Okay, perfect. And I believe it's going to be launched. But the question here really is, question for you, how many credit card transaction data points does it take to uniquely identify a person? And it provided you several options available. Okay, perfect. Let's take a look at the results. And most of you got it right. It is correct, and it is 4. Perfect. So yeah, 90% of people can actually be identified from 4 samples out of 30 days of credit card transaction data from 1.1 million people. That's pretty crazy. And if you think about the transaction data, all it is, it provides kind of the amounts and addresses of the locations that something was purchased at. So it's pretty crazy. So that's all I have prepared for you today. Thank you so much. Now it's time for a Q&A.
Thank you, Andrey. Okay, so we're now going to begin taking questions for Andrey that you, based upon his presentation, and you can still submit questions right now through the questions pane in your attendee control panel.
Okay, perfect. So while you guys typing in your questions, one of the most kind of frequent questions that I have, especially when talking about when client side, server side, they say, you know, like, what's the most popular, what's the best way to kind of optimize my infrastructure to allow for most efficient kind of redaction flow? And I would say that first, you know, we have the file storage where the documents are going to be residing. And then second is the next piece is going to be a server piece that can extract the text out of a PDF and perform analysis on it. So you can use and plug it in with a machine learning algorithm for text analysis to see if there's any personally identifiable information in there or anything specific from our word bank that we could be possibly looking for, and then create those placeholder redaction annotations on top of the document and sends that document to the user's front end. Then the user can kind of go through multiple stages with multiple users or just them alone to kind of identify and say, hey, that's a good redaction, great job. No, that's not personally identifiable information. We can just remove this. This should be added, and this how we should kind of tag it or classify as. So this way we can kind of improve our process in the future as well. And then after it's done, we can apply the redactions and move the document to the next stage, whether it's emailing it out or releasing it to the public.